Hi, I'm Kristy Ella. Sometimes the best lessons come from ordinary moments. As Masha Ann makes her way toward a long-awaited reunion, old memories and quiet truths begin to rise to the surface. Let's listen to Masha Ann as she shares her story.
I hung up the phone and my heart was racing. Susan wants to see me today. The morning air is sharp and biting, a hard -15. But there's a warmth blooming in my chest that makes everything else fade. I quickly packed my bag, and as I lock the front door, I hear the click behind me. My boots crunch on the frosted pavement. My breath rises in soft clouds in front of me. Each step feels like a marker on the road back to Susan. The bus ride stretches out ahead, 2 hours through a stark winter landscape. Every town we pass, every snow-dusted field rolling by the window, feels like a milestone on a pilgrimage toward her. This isn't just a trip from Oakville to Collingwood, it's a bridge across time, a closing of the 2-year gap that's been sitting between us. I wonder how Susan has changed. Will her laugh still sound the same? Does she still tuck her hair behind her ears when she's thinking? The anticipation hums through me, and I catch myself smiling for no reason at all. In my mind, I can already see the coffee shop, warm, inviting, the smell of fresh coffee wrapping around us, the sound of our laughter finding its rhythm again. As the bus moves forward, my thoughts drift through the years. I see Susan as a little girl, her small hand tucked safely in mine. Scraped knees, bedtime stories, the proud, shining smile on her face at graduation. The memories don't make me sad. They feel steady, loving. They're the ground beneath my feet as I make my way back to her. This meeting feels like a chance to know her again, to see the woman she's become, to witness the life she's building for herself. She mentioned good news on the phone. I turn it over gently in my mind. A promotion maybe, someone special. Maybe she's even thinking about moving closer to home. I don't let myself land on any one possibility for too long. I don't want to build expectations. The real gift is this moment, the invitation back into her world. Whatever she wants to tell me will come when it comes. Today's excitement is about who's waiting for me there. Susan had left Oakville to start her own life when she was 22. Her visits home became less frequent, and it had been over 2 years since I had seen her. We had had some bumpy roads. I had missed her so much, but I believed she hadn't visited because she was busy creating the life she wanted. "Mom, I am too busy to come this month," she would always respond when I asked her to visit. Of course I missed her, but I was happy to watch her take control of her world, follow her plans, and grow into the life she dreamed of. That's part of being a parent, letting go, even when it aches a little. That morning it was a cold -15, the kind of cold that doesn't just chill you, it settles in. When I stepped off the bus, the cold ripped through me and I quickly scurried to the restaurant, just a few blocks away. I arrived 15 minutes early, hopeful and excited. Through the cafe window, I could see Susan sitting with her friends, lunch plates still on the table, glasses half full. They were laughing easily, comfortably, like people who see each other often. She looked happy. She was truly beautiful. I stood watching for a few moments and then Susan looked up and saw me. I saw a quick look of frustration pass her face, but she quickly came to the door and whispered, "Mom," glancing at her phone, "you're a bit early." "I know," I said quickly. "The bus got me here faster than I expected. I was just excited to see you. You said you had news." She nodded. "I do, it's just, my friends arrived late," she explained. "We were supposed to have lunch first." A cold blast of wind cut sharply between us. "There's a little coffee place next door," she said, pointing down the street. "Why don't you grab a coffee and warm up? I'll text you when we're done." She said it kindly, reasonably, like this was the only obvious solution.
Stay tuned for Chapter 2. Chapter 2, The Other Cup of Coffee.
Oh, I said, okay. She gave me a quick hug, the kind you give when your mind is already somewhere else. I'll text you, she said again. And then she went back inside. The door closed. The warmth stayed in. I looked at my watch. It was 12:40. Another gust of wind chilled me to the bones. As I stood there on the sidewalk, watching my daughter turn back to her friends, already absorbed in conversation again. My hands shook, and not just from the cold. These were the hands that had raised her, that worked extra shifts, that traveled 2 hours by bus for a simple cup of coffee and a piece of good news. I started walking toward the coffee shop she'd pointed out. Tears were starting to brim my eyes, then I stopped. Something settled in me, not anger, not sadness, it was clarity. I realized Susan hadn't misunderstood. She just expected me to wait. After 2 hours on a bus in the frigid temperatures, for coffee I was invited to, so I didn't. I turned around and walked the other way, the cold biting harder with every step. I walked until the cafe disappeared from my blurry view. I was holding back the wet tears as memories were flooding me of Susan as she was a child. I could see her laughter and her tears, her curly brown hair blowing in the wind as she swung on the tire tree, her little legs dangling, pushing her. The tire still swung in the backyard, and every now and then the wind would make it creak, and I would picture her swinging there. She was so full of life, but life hadn't been easy. Her dad had left us when she was only 9 years old. She was a resilient child and always knew what she wanted. Stay tuned for Chapter 3. Chapter 3, Susan's Message. I found another cafe and ordered a cup of hot peppermint tea. An hour passed by without a message from Susan. I tried not to cry. I left the cafe and I checked into a small hotel nearby. I pulled out my phone again, hoping for a message from my daughter, but there was none. So turned my phone off. Completely. Not to punish anyone, just to rest and sort through my feelings. I ran a long bath with the complimentary bubble bath and a glass of wine from the fridge. I just let my mind wander. I told myself that maybe tomorrow we'd meet. Maybe things would feel different in the morning. I settled in for a good night of sleep. The next morning when I turned my phone back on, there were 10 messages from Susan. With each one, her impatience grew. Not a single word asking if I was okay. All about her frustration, her drama, her inconvenience. Mom, where are you? I thought you said you'd be here. I can't believe you left. You're ruining my day. Are you even coming? Don't you want to hear my good news? And so on, each one sharper than the last. I sat with it for a long moment. I put my phone back down, then I packed my bag. On the first bus home, I finally texted Susan back. I'm on my way home now. If you'd like to see me, you're always welcome here. I didn't leave angry. I didn't leave hurt. I left clear.
I hope you enjoyed Martha's story. Let's reflect on her journey together. Let me ask you, what would you have done? Would you have waited for your daughter? Martha Ann made a very hard decision that day. Let's take a moment to reflect on this. I think Marcia Ann showed quiet strength. She didn't yell, she didn't dramatize. She simply recognized her worth and set a boundary with calm dignity. That's hard, that's powerful. And it's a lesson we all need sometimes, especially when love is wrapped in expectation. My hope for Martha Ann is that her daughter will make it a priority to take a trip back home. It would mean everything to her. Kristy Ella Stories. Hi, I'm Kristy Ella. Today I want to share one of my favorite bite-sized stories about love, life, and the quiet courage it takes to begin again. So settle in. Let's listen to Jolene tell her story. How George came back to me.
I didn't expect my life to fall apart on a Tuesday. Nothing dramatic happened. No shouting, no slammed doors, just a quiet realization that the life I was living didn't fit me anymore. I was 52 years old, sitting at my kitchen table, staring at a cup of tea that had long gone cold. I had spent most of my life taking care of other people: wife, mother, employee, problem solver, housekeeper. But somewhere along the way, I had misplaced myself. When my youngest moved out and my marriage gently unraveled, the house became unbearably quiet. At first, I filled the silence with noise: the television, podcasts, cleaning cupboards that didn't need cleaning. But silence has a way of waiting for you. One afternoon, I found an old sketchbook in a drawer. The pages were yellowed and bent at the corners, but they were there. Pictures I had drawn of my dog, George. I hadn't drawn in over 30 years. When I was young, I loved to draw dogs, golden retrievers especially. I sat down at my desk with shaking hands. The pencil felt like a foreign object in my hands. My very first sketches after all those years were supposed to be golden retriever, but honestly, they looked more like lumpy foxes with sad eyes. The legs were too long. The heads were too square. One of them looked like it had 3 tails. I laughed at myself, and then I drew another one. I used to have a golden retriever named George when I was a little girl. He followed me everywhere. If I ran, he ran. If I sat in the grass, he would gently lean against me as if he understood that sometimes that was just what I needed. I can still remember the way his fur caught the sunlight, almost glowing, and the weight of his head resting on my knee. Strangely, I can't remember what happened to him. I've tried. I've searched my memory like flipping through an old photo album with missing pages. I wish daily that my parents were still here so I could ask them, but what I do remember is how safe I felt with him. So I kept drawing him. Day after day, my golden retriever drawings improved. The snout softened. The eyes gained life. The fur began to move on the page instead of sitting flat and stiff. And something unexpected happened. As the dogs became more recognizable, so did I. Each sketch felt like reclaiming a piece of the girl who once lay in the grass with George, dreaming of who she might become. I decided to start going to a small art class at the community center. I almost turned the car around 3 times in the parking lot. I told myself I was too old, too rusty, too foolish, but I walked in anyway. There were 12 of us, some retired, some starting over, some just lonely. We laughed more than we painted, and slowly I realized something important. It wasn't about becoming a great artist. It was about giving myself permission to exist beyond my responsibilities. Months passed. My house didn't feel so quiet anymore. It felt peaceful. My drawings were displayed all over the place. One evening, my daughter came over for dinner. She wandered into the spare room I had turned into my little studio. On the wall were 6 golden retrievers, each one better than the last. She stood there for a moment and said softly, "Mom, I haven't seen you this happy in a long time." I didn't even realize it was true until she said it. The truth is, my life didn't fall apart on that Tuesday. It opened. Reinvention doesn't require youth. It requires courage. And courage doesn't roar. Sometimes it just whispers, "Try again." At 52, I didn't become someone new. I simply found the girl who once ran through the yard with a golden retriever named George, and I let her lead the way home. And that, it turns out, was more than enough.
I think Jolene's story really hits home. Sometimes the things we loved as children are not childish at all. They're clues. What part of you is quietly waiting to be remembered? Until next time. I'm Kristy Ella, The Cat That Knew, a story about letting go and what comes to fill the space, a short story for women who are rewriting what comes next.
How a cat changed everything. If you had told Sherry Davies on the morning of October 6th that her life was about to change, she would have laughed. Not unkindly. Just the laugh of a woman who knows that the dramatic turning points of life are mostly behind her. She was 54. Her daughter had just left for college. The house was quiet in a way that had weight to it. She believed, simply in the part of the story that comes after your child leaves home. She was wrong, but she didn't know that yet. She didn't know that very soon. A small gray and orange cat with amber eyes would appear on her porch steps, as if delivered by something she didn't have a name for. She didn't know that this cat, this stray, this wanderer who belonged to no one and somehow to everyone, would lead her, quietly and without fanfare, back to herself. She didn't know that the empty nest wasn't the ending she feared. It was an opening she hadn't recognized yet, because she'd been too busy grieving the closing of the last door to notice the one swinging open behind her. She was about to learn that empty and open are not the same thing, and that sometimes what finds you in your quietest moment knows exactly what you need.
This is the story of how Sherry found that out, and how a cat, mysterious, unhurried, and inexplicably wise, showed her the way.
The quiet was the thing nobody had warned Sherry about. Not the silence of early mornings, when the world simply hasn't woken yet. She'd always loved those. This was a different kind of silence. A carved-out silence, the kind that has the shape of people in it. Her daughter Emma had left for college on a Friday, 10 days ago. Sherry still counted in days rather than weeks because weeks felt too permanent. Days she could manage. She stood at the kitchen window, holding a mug of tea she hadn't drunk, watching the backyard fade into the blue-gray of early evening. The swing set her ex-husband had built when Emma was 4 still stood at the edge of the lawn. Slightly lopsided, one chain rusted to the color of an old penny. She should take it down. She'd known that for 3 years. She didn't move. Then she noticed it, the cat peering at her on the porch. She opened the door and it looked at her with its big amber eyes as if to say hello. "I'm here for you," she whispered. "Go home. You don't live here." The cat continued to stare at her and refused to budge. The strange things began quietly, as they always do. The cat, she had started thinking of it as Sunshine, though she refused to say the name out loud, because naming a thing means keeping it. Sunshine began to lead her, not dramatically, just small, insistent redirections. A presence near the back door that made Sherry step outside at 7 a.m. the next morning, where she found the first frost had come overnight. The garden glittered. Her breath clouded the air. She stood there in her slippers and thought, with genuine surprise, when did the world get this beautiful? There it was again, curled up on her porch chair. A cat, small, the color of storm clouds and winter ash, gray with patches of something almost sunshine. It sat at the edge of her porch steps, as if it had been waiting for a reasonable hour before announcing itself. Its eyes, when it looked up at Sherry, were an extraordinary amber. Not quite gold, the color of leaves that haven't decided whether to fall yet. "You're not mine," she whispered to it. The cat blinked once, slowly, the way cats do when they have already made a decision you haven't been informed of yet. Thinking it must be hungry, she brought out a saucer of milk. She didn't know why she even had milk anymore, and set it at the bottom of the steps. The cat descended, one step at a time with enormous dignity, and drank. It looked up at her as if to say thank you, and slightly brushed against her legs before padding down the steps and into the garden. It was back the next morning, and the morning after that. By the end of the week, it was sleeping on the porch chair cushion, curled into itself like a small, self-contained planet. Sherry started buying cat food. She told herself it was temporary. Small, insistent redirections were happening to Sherry. She began to step outside at 7 in the morning, wondering if the cat would be there. Her breath clouded the air. She stood there in her slippers and thought, with genuine surprise, when did the world get this beautiful? The cat was curled up on the chair but woke up to look at her. "It's cold," said Sherry. "You might as well come inside." For a long moment the cat peered at her with eyes that said, "It's about time." It then followed her down the hallway and stopped suddenly outside Emma's bedroom door. Sherry hadn't opened that door since the day Emma had left. She had tried but couldn't bring herself to do it. She paused, she looked at the cat, and then she opened the door and went in. The cat followed right beside. She sat on the edge of Emma's bed, among the stuffed animals and the leftover dolls, and the ghost of a childhood still faintly present in the room. And she cried. A gut-wrenching, long, honest cry she hadn't let herself have. The cat curled up beside her, purring softly. Her presence felt so warm and natural. She hadn't expected to enjoy the warm presence of the cat. She looked down, scratched its ears, and said, "I'm going to call you Sunshine. That's your name, and I'm keeping you." That night, Sunshine slept on the end of her bed, and it just felt so right. Sherry was ready to leave for the grocery store early the next morning, keys in hand, purse on shoulder, when Sunshine planted herself in front of the door. Not aggressively, just present. Immovable in that particular cat way, as though she weighed 400 pounds instead of 4. Sherry laughed, set her purse down, and then her phone rang. Her doctor's office. The mammogram results had flagged something. Could she come in as soon as possible for a closer look? She sat down slowly on the hallway bench, a phone call she had been waiting weeks for. Sunshine jumped up beside her and pressed her warm, solid weight against Sherry's side, and stayed there. "Thank you," she said softly. She wasn't entirely sure what she was thanking her for, but it felt true. The second mammogram found nothing serious, a shadow that turned out to be light. She cried in the car afterward, relief this time, and then laughed at herself, and then cried a little more, and all of it felt exactly right. She drove home thinking about Sunshine, about how a cat that belonged to no one had simply appeared at the exact moment she needed her, the exact moment that Sherry couldn't remember who she was. She had poured herself into motherhood so completely, so willingly, so lovingly, that when Emma walked out the door with her suitcase and her favorite pillow and her whole beautiful future ahead of her, Sherry had felt herself go too, as though she'd been packed into those boxes. But Sunshine hadn't seen an empty woman. Sunshine had seen a woman with room in her heart, and there is a difference. She thought about the swing set, about how she hadn't taken it down not because she was holding on to Emma's childhood, but because she hadn't yet imagined what she might put in that space instead. A garden maybe, a reading bench, something that was hers. She thought about herself at 22, the woman she'd been before she became someone's mother, the painting class she'd registered for and never taken, the trip to Portugal planned twice and canceled twice, the computer she never used. She thought about empty, she thought about open. Those were, she understood now, not the same thing at all. Sherry made her tea. She drank it while it was still warm. Then she opened her laptop and signed up for the painting class. Then she emailed a travel agent about Portugal. Then she opened a new document, stared at the blinking cursor for a while, and typed 2 words: "My life." Outside, the October swing set caught the breeze and creaked as it moved, a slow, gentle arc, and was still. Inside, Sunshine purred, and Sherry smiled, really smiled. A sense of contentment rushed through her. What Sunshine taught her. In the months that followed, Sherry found herself returning again and again to that strange, quiet season when a stray cat had arrived on her porch and changed the direction of her life. Not with drama, not with any grand gesture, just by showing up, steadily, warmly, day after day, and refusing to let her disappear into her own silence. She thought about what Sunshine had actually done when she broke it down honestly. Sunshine had shown her the frost she hadn't even noticed, the beauty that was there all along, just outside a door she'd stopped opening. Sunshine had walked her to Emma's room, to the grief she'd been stepping around, which turned out, once she walked through it, to be manageable, even necessary. Sunshine had kept her home the morning the phone rang, the phone call she had been anxiously waiting weeks for. Sherry still got a chill thinking about that one. Sunshine had sat beside her in the hardest moment and asked for nothing, just offered warmth. Was it magic? Sherry wasn't sure she believed in magic exactly, but she believed in timing. She believed that the universe, or life, or whatever you wanted to call the force that moves things along, occasionally sends something your way that is precisely what you need, in precisely the form you are able to receive it. She had not been able to receive a self-help book that autumn. She had not been able to receive advice from well-meaning friends who told her she'd get used to it. She had not been able to receive her own internal voice, which had been drowned out by years of being needed. But she could receive a small gray and orange striped cat who showed up on her porch and simply refused to leave. "I think I needed something that needed me back," Sherry told a friend months later. "But not in the old way, not in the way that used to take everything I had. Sunshine needed me just enough to get me out of bed every morning. And that turned out to be enough to remind me that I still had a life to get up for." The painting class led to new friends and experiences she never imagined. The Portugal trip happened the following spring, solo, and it was the best 2 weeks of her life. The journal she'd started that November morning had 43 pages by March. Emma came home for Thanksgiving, for winter break, for a weekend in February just because. She and Sherry talked more than they had in years, 2 women now, meeting each other fresh, without the scaffolding of daily logistics between them. It was new, different, Sherry realized with surprise. Different, but amazing. And sunshine, yes, sunshine, was still there. Every morning on the kitchen tiles. Every evening curled at the foot of the bed. A small, warm, amber-eyed constant in a life that was finally, beautifully, moving again.
Sherry had been so afraid of what it would feel like when her daughter left. She had imagined it as a kind of ending, an erasure. What she had not imagined, could not have imagined until a cat arrived on her porch on a cool October morning and looked up at her with those knowing eyes, was that it would feel in time like the first page of something she'd been waiting her whole life to be. I hope this story has inspired you. I'm Kristy Ella.